we've already talked about how Rahu and Ketu give the results of their lords, that they give the results of the grahas that they join, and how they give the results of Saturn and Mars, with Rahu giving the results of Saturn and Ketu giving the results of Mars. So all those planets will be activated by Rahu and Ketu in their dashas. So the antardashas of those planets are all going to give very specific results. Okay, very concrete, specific, and important times within the dashas of Rahu and Ketu. Now, then there's Rahu and Ketu themselves, though. And as we've talked about, Rahu and Ketu represent a path that our consciousness is taking to grow and evolve. So what's that path going to be like? That's another very important consideration for determining the effects of Rahu and Ketu. Is that path going to be smooth or difficult, is basically what it comes down to. Now we know that path is going to follow the direction of the bhava that Rahu and Ketu join. So if Rahu is in the 8th and Ketu is in the 2nd, and Rahu is conjuncting the 8th bhava and Ketu is conjuncting the 2nd bhava, then the path is going to be from one's own personal resources, 2nd house, to other people's resources and monies, 8th house. Okay, and that'll be the path that they'll make most of their growth in. Now, how much growth is going to happen and how smooth that path is going to be is a really important consideration, obviously. And that is determined by the influences to Rahu and Ketu. So, all the planets joining or aspecting Rahu and Ketu are going to determine just how focused and successful that path is. How easy it is or how hard it is. And the entire time that a person's in the dasha of Rahu or Ketu, they'll be on that path in a real major way. And of course, they'll be on that path in a minor way at other periods of their lives as well. So you always want to take a good look at how that path is looking. Okay? Now, we have to sort of treat Rahu and Ketu more like a bhava cusp when we look at the influences to them than we do as a planet. Planets, as you know, we judge through the influences of friends and enemies. That's the most important consideration, and that's incorporated in the Lajitadi Avastas. But Rahu and Ketu don't have friends. They don't have enemies. Some texts try to give them, and modern authors especially try to give them friends and enemies. None of it's concrete, none of it's true. They don't have friends and enemies any more than a bhavakas has a friend or enemy. Okay? They're points that are either indicating a smooth path or a difficult path, the same way as your first house is indicating a smooth path or a difficult path in your life. Okay? So, the planets that are influencing it through conjunction or aspect are going to determine just how well Rahu and Ketu are doing. Now, to do really well, we need Rahu and Ketu to be capable. They have to have abilities. They have to have knowledge, skills, strengths, healthy detachment. They have to have qualities. Okay? Now, all those qualities come from the planets. So the sun gives the quality of steadfastness. The moon gives the quality of adaptability and receptivity. Mars gives the quality of fighting for what's important and exerting one's will to succeed in something that's important. Mercury gives the quality of being very skillful and lucky in an area. Jupiter gives the quality of having wisdom and knowledge. Venus gives the quality of creating harmony, diplomacy, and ease and luxury, where things just can happen really smoothly. And of course, Saturn gives the quality of perseverance, okay, to persevere to the success and end of anything. So all those planets, if they're in good dignities, meaning they're in a friend sign or better, then that person's going to have a good dose of those qualities. And if those planets are aspecting or conjunct Rahu and Ketu will get those qualities as well. So those conjunctions and aspects by planets in good dignity are going to help Rahu and Ketu become more capable. They're just better at making the things in the house that they're in happen. And that right away can produce success, go a long way in producing success. Okay. Now, the other planet that helps Rahu or Ketu become capable, or excuse me, let's not get there. Okay, so those are the planets that make Rahu and Ketu capable, meaning able-bodied, okay, having some talent, skills, abilities to further the house that they're in and move the person up that path. Okay. The other thing that has to happen, though, is that Rahu and Ketu have to be given attention and priority and focus, meaning we basically have to do the house that Rahu and Ketu are in. So if Rahu's in the second house, how much time are we really focused on developing our resources? Is that a big part of our lives? Or is it something we sort of neglect? Okay. So the more focus there is on Rahu and Ketu, the more attention that they're given, the more chance there are for things to succeed. Whereas on the other hand, if a person does other things instead of developing Rahu and Ketu, then they're going to develop other things at the expense of not developing Rahu and Ketu. And that's really what so much of predictive astrology is about. People always have this fear, oh, this bad thing is going to happen to me, and oh, Saturn's looking at me and he's going to ruin my life. You know, honestly, most things aren't like that. Most of predictions just have to do with the fact that the person prioritizes their life in such a way to get what they have. It's just that simple. And then they go to the astrologer and whine about the things they don't have because they want to have their cake and eat it too. Okay? Which is just not how life works. Everything takes time and energy. We've only got so much time and energy, and therefore, in accordance to our priorities, we're going to have a different amount of success in different areas. So, Rahu and Ketu not only have to be capable to really be successful and really have a lot of the bhavas that they're in, we have to give a lot of attention to them. We have to prioritize those things. Some people will prioritize the bhavakas, the house, the path that Rahu's in. Other people won't. It just depends on the chart. Okay, so there's two rules for determining just how much, of a focus is put on Rahu and Ketu. How much time the person's really just doing Rahu and Ketu. Okay? Now, if Rahu and Ketu are aspected or joined by their Lord, then there's a lot of emphasis on Rahu and Ketu. So there's more opportunities for them to succeed in promoting the bhavakas that they join. There's more time put into trying to develop those bhavakas. Okay? So there's more focus on it. And then if Rahu's capable as well, there's going to be more success. Or if Rahu or Ketu are also capable by being aspected by Gras and good dignity, they'll have more success. Okay? So that's pretty easy to understand. And that's the very same concept we learned when we judged bhavas, that a bhava aspected by its lord can flourish. Same with Rahu and Ketu. Rahu and Ketu joined or aspected by its lord has more opportunities to flourish. Okay? And of course, it's never good for Rahu or Ketu to be lord to be in bad dignity, in which case there's going to be some troublesome events. But still, that lord aspecting will still give them more opportunities in that area. They'll be more involved in that area and more focused in that area. Okay? The next rule is a little more vast rule. It has to do with what's called temporal benefics and temporal malefics, which means depending on the lagna in a chart, certain planets are considered to be, shubhas or auspicious for that ascendant, and other grahas are considered to be ashubha or inauspicious for that ascendant. Okay? And that's an area of astrology. It's probably the most misunderstood area of astrology. And it makes a lot of people really freak out about certain planets. Like Leo, oh, my Saturn's evil. Well, don't think that way, okay? This is a very specific type of measurement. And what it has to do with is that certain planets in the chart, meaning certain lords of Rashis, as counted from the ascendant, as they go about taking care of their business, they also pay attention to other people's business too, to the other planet's business. And so they help everyone's business that they're influencing. Okay? Whereas other planets are so focused on their own business that they're not able to help the business of other planets. Okay? And they're so focused on their other planets that they actually take away time from the business of other things that they don't rule. Okay? So it's a matter of where the person prioritizes their focus. And then, of course, if that inauspicious Bhava Lord, or Lord, temporally evil or malefic Lord, is in great shape, they're going to have a lot of success with that planet. That planet will produce for them. But it'll do so at the expense of not producing lots of other things for them. Okay? And those planets actually oftentimes will be the planets that a person can do the most with, because they're so focused on that planet that they do a whole lot of that planet. Whereas the other planets, they'll do some of that planet, but it also spreads out through the chart and has a more holistic effect where a lot of good things flourish, but not necessarily to the degree and power of that one really narrow-minded, focused planet. Okay? So these so-called malefic house lords are malefic because they're only out for their own bhavas. They're not going to take care of anyone else's bhavas, and they're going to be so focused on their own bhavas that they're going to take away time to develop the other bhavas. And essentially that means the person would rather be doing those things than the other things. It's more important for them to get those other things done than those other things. So it's really a matter of where the person chooses to put their energy because of what is innately their nature, and not because of some curse or anything like that. Okay? So first of all, the lords of the 1st, 5th, and 9th Rashis, and these are Rashis, not Bhavas. So the lords of the 1st, 5th, and 9th Rashis from the Lagna are considered to be Shubha lords, regardless of the actual Bhava cusp they rule. The 1st, 5th, and 9th Rashi lords are the Shubhas, or auspicious lords. So when these aspects are joined Rahu or Ketu, they open up Rahu and Ketu to greater experiences and more opportunities. So there's simply going to be more room for the person to involve themselves in that area and therefore develop it. Okay? The first lord makes Rahu or Ketu in that case just a bigger part of the person's day-to-day natural life path. Okay? It's just more part of their life. The 5th and 9th lords create more opportunities for Rahu and Ketu by just giving lucky breaks, giving fortune, and helping maintain things because the person's paying attention to those things, and so they sort of create their own luck. Luck is not something that just happens. Luck is something we create because we pay attention with our intelligence and knowledge. And that's the luck and fortune that 4th, 5th, and 9th lords, especially the 5th lord, has to do with. It's not just luck that just comes out of nowhere. It's luck because we pay attention and use our intelligence and make an effort. Okay? So, when these lords, the 1st, 5th, and 9th lords, are in good dignity and not sleeping, they basically have to not be sleeping especially, then they'll help out Rahu and Ketu a lot. Okay? They'll just give more opportunities for the person to engage in the areas influenced by Rahu and Ketu. And that's what Rahu and Ketu need. They need opportunities to flourish. If we just ignore them, it's never going to happen. So a person with Rahu in the 7th house who never ever talks to a member of the opposite sex is never ever going to improve their Rahu. Okay? Whereas a person with Rahu in the 7th house who makes an effort to talk to the opposite sex, even though really having lots of issues, over time develops the skills for better relationships. Okay? So, we want those lords, 1st, 5th, and 9th lords, to be in good dignity. And remember always, the lord of Rahu or Ketu will always help focus Rahu and Ketu in a similar fashion. Okay? Creating more opportunities for engaging with Rahu and Ketu. Now, if these lords are sleeping, then they're just not going to be able to do anything. Okay? They just won't have any juice to open up Rahu and Ketu to any possibilities. Okay. Then we have the lords of the 3rd, 6th, and 11th Rashis from the Lagna. These are the Ashubha or malefic lords. These are the lords that are very focused on something to the expense of not focusing on other things. Okay? So while those lords will really take care of their own bhavas, they're not going to do it in such a way that other bhavas are allowed to prosper. They're going to do it at the expense of other bhavas. But that doesn't mean we don't get something in return. Okay? But these are the planets that are really focused on their concerns. So the third house has to do with exerting our will and energy against difficulties and that we want to succeed in. And anything that takes all of our strength, all of our intelligence, all of our skills is third house. So an artist, for instance, who really wants to be an artist, think how much time they're going to have to spend to develop their painting skills at the expense of a lot of other things. Think of the gymnast who won world championships, who spent 14 years out of their first 17 years training all day long. That takes a good third lord, okay? So anything where we really want it and we're really willing to train and succeed, and we just really want it, we're hungry for it, and so we're willing to put all our energy into it so we can succeed in it, that's the third lord. And it can even be the mad scientist who's just trying to work out some formula, who's just concentrating and measuring and testing and experimenting all day long. He does it at the expense of other things. He does it at the expense of his health, the expense of his wealth, the expense of his relationships, at the expense of anything that the third lord is basically influencing. Okay? But as a result, they get something they really, really want. And the third bhava is considered the house of difficulties. But if we look at the results of lords in other houses, Parashara likes the third lord all in all, in the sense that it can give some really great things, but it is going to do it at the expense of other things. So third house, lord influencing Rahu and Ketu, just shows that the person's so focused on the things that they're trying to develop of the third house, and that's detracting away from Rahu and Ketu. And of course, the stronger the third lord is, the more a person's going to be focused on that. So if the third lord's sleeping, the person's not going to have that focus. Okay? So it won't detract from other things at all. But it won't give them those third house successes and breakthroughs. Okay? If the third lord is strong, like in its own sign or exalted, then the person really has that strong-minded, put all their energy into something to succeed quality, and they'll focus on what's most interesting or most important to them, and that'll detract them away from all those things, those other bhavas that it influences. And the nature of the third lord will always have to do with what they're focused on. So say a person has Jupiter, the third lord, in the third house. At that point, they're going to be very focused on developing knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Jupiter qualities, right? They'll be a really strongly intellectual, learning-centered person. And they'll make a lot of achievements of that third lord in the third house nice and strong. But they will okay, everything's okay. It will detract them from succeeding in other things in their life. So it's a price that they pay because of their great interest in something. Okay? Not a price they pay because they're cursed. They'd rather be doing that third house thing than enjoying making more money or spending more money or going on vacations or whatever. Okay? So if you see a person who's got a really strong third house, a really strong third lord, that person's going to be a focused person, okay, at the expense of other things in their lives, okay. The sixth house, well, actually, let's skip to the 11th first. The 11th house is really similar to the third. In fact, the 11th house is the third house backwards from the ascendant, okay. And, the third house has to do with our arms, and the 11th house has to do with our legs. So the third and 11th houses are sort of where we want to go. The third house is what we really want to do so much that we'll do it at the expense of other things. The things we want to get our hands in and do, because hands are all about doing things. The 11th house has to do with where we want to get to. It's just like our legs, get us places, right? So when a person has a strong 11th house, there's somewhere they really want to get to in life. Sort of like the 3rd house. The 3rd house, they really want to do something. With the 11th house, they really want to achieve something or get somewhere. So there's a slight difference. The 3rd house person just wants to do something, okay? The 11th house wants an achievement from that or wants to get somewhere from that. So they'll be more, focused on the rewards of all those things. The titles, the honors, the income, whatever. The 3rd house person just wants to do it. They just want to paint 8 hours a day or write 8 hours a day. The 11th house person wants to write 8 hours a day because they want to win a Pulitzer Prize, okay? Or they want to write a best-selling book that brings them attention and wealth and all that kind of stuff, okay? So the 11th house has a similar intense focus as the 3rd house of a person working with effort and patience towards a long-term goal that's really important to them, okay? The stronger that Lord, the more they're going to focus on those types of goals in their lives, and the more those goals will detract away from other things in their life. Okay? So if the 11th Lord is aspecting Rahu or Ketu, they just won't spend as much time developing Rahu and Ketu because they're so focused on developing the things that they want to succeed in and achieve. Okay? So both those houses give some strength to them. And it's actually thought that the 11th Lord, all other factors equal, such as dignity and stuff, that the 11th Lord is more intense that way, is more focused, takes away more from other Bhavas and is more focused on its own Bhava than is the 3rd Lord or the 6th Lord. So the 11th Lord is considered like the most powerful one. Okay, the 6th Lord has to do with the struggle for survival. Okay? On earth, it's a struggle to survive. We just have to deal with certain things. We have to keep our health in shape. We have to find a way to maintain our bodies and fulfill the duties we have to fulfill that if we don't, we suffer. So the 6th house is any responsibility that if we don't fulfill, we're going to suffer. If we don't fulfill the responsibilities of taking care of our body, we suffer illness. If we don't fulfill the responsibilities of feeding our body, we get sick. If we don't fulfill the responsibilities of paying our debts and the money we owe, we get thrown in jail or have our things taken away. Okay? So those duties that we are required to do in order to take care of ourselves on planet Earth, or else we're going to suffer terribly on planet Earth, all those things are 6th house. And that's a very, very important bhava. In fact, there's a Varga chart dedicated to 6th house, and that's the Trim Samsha, the 30th Varga. And it's all about arishtas, or the fatalities and trouble that one can suffer if they don't take care of the things they have to. If they're not responsible for their health and finances, basically. Okay? So, that Lord is very focused on taking care of those things at the expense of other things. So, for instance, if a person's sick, which is 6th house issue, right away we know them trying to get well is going to take a priority of over other things in their life, and they're just not going to be as involved in other things in life. They'll sacrifice, anyone will sacrifice other things in their life in order to get well, right? And people are forced to sacrifice other things in their life because of the fact that they have bills to pay or else they'll be in trouble. So the 6th house has that same nature. It's not a bad thing. It's a part of life. It's an essential thing that we have to fulfill in life. And it's such a high priority thing that it takes away from the other things in life. It's the struggle to survive. Without succeeding in that, we can't succeed in anything, right? So that 6th Lord gets very focused in that way. And the 11th Lord has a similar effect as the 6th, because the 11th is the 6th from the 6th. So the 11th house also has within it that struggle to survive, but not in that primal way the 6th house is just trying to survive. The 11th house is trying to survive on a better level. It's trying to survive on a higher level. So it's the high school teacher who's also trying to get his PhD, going to night school, so that he can become a university professor and survive on a higher level. Okay? It's the guy making $10 an hour who's working hard to get a promotion so he can get $20 an hour and survive on a higher level. So 11th house does have this connotation of through achievement, through succeeding, a person can survive on a higher level. That's the goal of the 11th house. But it does have that same 6th house connotation. Okay? So you can see why these Lagna lords, or these sign lords from the Lagna, take away from other things, because they're really focused on other things. Okay, and they're counted from the Lagna because they have to do with what supports that Rashi Lagna. Because that Rashi Lagna is what we're trying to support this lifetime, because that's us. Okay? Now, there's one exception to this, or one addition. Saturn, as the 7th and 8th lord for Cancer, is also considered to be an Ashubha in this respect, which means it'll only support its own bhavas. It won't support other bhavas it influences. It'll detract from them. Okay? And Saturn for Cancer represents real strong desire and needs for relationships and bonding with other people. It's that strong social need of the moon. You know, the moon, according to Parashara, is lovesick. It has such a strong urge to be loved. Okay? And Saturn represents that really, really strong urge. And the fact that it's Saturn just shows how scary and difficult it is to fulfill that urge, because a person has to work through their blocks and issues in order to have that urge and need fulfilled. But Saturn is that intense planet for Cancer that wants to fulfill that urge to be loved, and who often suffers when that urge isn't fulfilled, but who does focus on it to such a degree that it will detract from other things. So when Saturn's strong in the chart for Cancer Lagna, relationships and bonding with another individual are going to take a priority over other things. As a result, they'll easily sacrifice other bhavas in order to have that thing. Okay? And of course, that makes a Cancer Lagna person a potentially great person to get married to, because they'll really will, if Saturn's in good shape, they'll really invest and persevere in a relationship with you, even at the expense of other things that are more trivial to them. But it all comes down to planetary strengths. If the 3rd lord is really strong for Cancer too, say they have a really strong Mercury, well, then they're going to have this really strong desire to do things too. And that part of them can take them away from their relationships. So it's all about strengths and what's stronger and what's influencing what, to see how the person makes certain choices to have the things that are in their lives. And we do this with these house lords. That's how we figure it out. Okay? Okay, then we've got, and again, these house lords, the 3rd, 6th, and 11th, when they're awake and strong or in friend sign or better, then they're very much able to develop their own houses, but at the expense of other houses, time spent in Rahu's and Ketu's areas. Okay. When they're sleeping, then their houses are not really invested, and so they won't detract away from other things in their lives. They won't detract away from Rahu and Ketu. Okay? So it's better in these the 3rd, 6th, and 11th lords, when they're in bad dignity, when they're sleeping, it detracts less from other areas of life. So a person may well have more success in other areas of life, but they won't have success with the things of the 3rd, 6th, and 11th house, which are in many ways important things. The 6th house is obviously important, but feeling like our life is getting somewhere, which is 11th house, can be important. And then 3rd house, of course, which is doing something that makes us feel, happy and focused and alive, is also important. Okay, so they're important things. Okay, then we have another group of lords, the lord of the 2nd, 12th, and 8th. These lords, if they're joined with the Shubha lord, with the 1st, 5th, or 9th, they act as a Shubha, which means they open up the focus of Rahu and Ketu if they influence them. Or if they're joined with the 3rd, 6th, or 11th lords, they're going to detract from the focus of Rahu and Ketu if they influence them. And when they're alone, they don't increase it or decrease it. But basically, their nature is dependent upon the planets that they're joined with, that they're in the same Rashi with, okay? Then the 4th, 7th, and 10th lords are neutral, and so they don't increase or decrease the focus of Rahu and Ketu, unless, of course, they're one of their lords. The lord always increases it, always helps it, okay? Okay, so Rahu and Ketu, they're going to give the effects of their lords, the planets joining them, and Rahu and Saturn and Mars in the antardashas of those planets. But as a general theme, they're sort of going to put the person on this either focused or unfocused, capable or incapable path. And they're going to give that general feel any other time. And that'll be the main thing they give, any other time when it's not the antardasha of one of those other planets that they activate. Okay? Especially in the beginning of the dasha. Okay, so Rahu, Rahu, and Ketu, Ketu especially give their nature at the beginning of that dasha. Okay? Now, Rahu, Rahu especially gives that nature. Now, if there's any trouble on Rahu, any bad influences to Rahu, bad dignified planets, some bad house lords, that can cause Rahu to destroy the house it's in Rahu, Rahu. Always, always, always pay a lot of attention to Rahu, Rahu dasha. Okay? Now, Ketu, on the other hand, is different. Ketu, Ketu, if it has some good stuff to it, will almost always give some new good stuff to that house it's conjunct. It might give some bad stuff at the same time, might get rid of some stuff and bring in some new good stuff in Ketu, Ketu. But usually you'll see it give a lot of new good stuff. But it's the end of Ketu dasha, okay? The very end of Ketu dasha that you'll often see if Ketu's in bad shape, meaning Ketu is afflicted by planets in bad dignity and has a lot of emphasis of strong planets that are the 3rd, 6th, and 11th lords on it. Then, the end of the Ketu period, Ketu's areas can just vaporize and get fulfilled and completed and end. Okay? So pay especially attention to Rahu's beginning dasha, Rahu, Rahu, and pay especially attention to the last part of Ketu dasha, which is Ketu Mercury. Okay? That can well be the dissolution time. Unless Ketu's in the sign of Mercury and Mercury's in great shape, you can expect some things to fade in the Ketu Mercury. Okay? All right, so how do we do this? Let's see some examples now, I think. We're going to look at those same 6 charts or so that we looked at the other day, just to help us see Rahu and Ketu in a little more well-rounded light. Okay? Starting with Ketu again. In fact, I want to put this here. Starting with Ketu. Ketu's joined its lord. So right away we know there's going to be a lot of focus on Ketu's area, right? Oh, one thing I wanted to say, going back to these lords, okay? Planets in good dignity make planet Rahu and Ketu capable. The 1st, 5th, and 9th lords give Rahu and Ketu more focus and opportunities. So the best thing to have influencing Rahu and Ketu are good, dignified 1st, 5th, and 9th lords. That's really what makes Rahu and Ketu not only capable, but you're actually involved in Rahu and Ketu, so you can take advantage of that capability to really help Rahu and Ketu flourish. Okay? Then there's the lords of the 3rd, 6th, and 11th. When they're strong and influencing Rahu and Ketu, when they're in good dignity, they can give the person capabilities to succeed in the areas of Rahu and Ketu, but they won't give the person the opportunities to it. Instead, the person will be taking those abilities somewhere else, to the Lord, to the house that the 3rd, 6th, or 11th Lord rules. As a result, even though they have the ability, they won't really spend a lot of time in that area of Rahu and Ketu. Because planet will detract from that time. So they have the ability, but not the opportunity. Okay? And so then, even though the ability is there, it won't help them flourish in that area. Okay? When the 3rd, 6th, and 11th lords, of course, are sleeping, they can't give any ability to Rahu and Ketu, but they won't detract from the time they take. So you'll find people will often have a relatively peaceful life. Because again, Rahu and Ketu are the planets that create a lot of chaos in our life, right? They're very tricky planets. And every time we jump into the house with Rahu in it especially, we're bound to land into a whole new world of confusion. Okay? If we have really strong 3rd, 6th, and 11th lords influencing Rahu and Ketu, the person won't jump into that world as often because they'll be so focused on other things. It'll sort of protect them from jumping into those foreign territories and confused areas ruled by Rahu and Ketu. So their life will be more peaceful, but they won't have the fulfillment that Rahu and Ketu are craving. So the person may well have a more peaceful life because they're focused on other things besides diving into Rahu and Ketu, but they won't have the same level of fulfillment and exciting adventures that Rahu and Ketu are craving underneath the surface. Okay? So keep all that in mind as you look at these charts or you study charts. So this person has got Venus conjunct Ketu. So there's going to be a lot of emphasis on 1st and 2nd house matters. Again, Ketu's in Libra, where the 1st and 2nd Bhavakas were also falling. So a lot of self-development, a lot of opportunities for self-development and developing their resources. And this has been very true of this person. Okay, they've been very fortunate in being able to develop those things without the normal stress and inconveniences that most people have to have. But what else is Ketu influenced by? And again, Venus is going to be a big one because it's the Lord and it's super strong. It's in Mula Trikona. It's the strongest planet that's going to be influencing Ketu. So it's really great. Okay? And it's the Lagna Lord, so it also opens them up to opportunities simply because it is a good Bhava Lord, a good house Lord from the Ascendant. Then Ketu is influenced by the Sun to 4 points. The Sun is strong, but it's a minor aspect. But the Sun is the 11th ruler from the Ascendant. I know it doesn't rule the 11th cusp, which falls in Cancer, but we're talking about full Rashi lords right now. For Libra, Sun is an evil planet. It'll detract from things. It'll detract from Ketu trying to develop the 1st and 2nd house, but only to a minor amount. So this person will have an emphasis to want to, the Sun can help them want to focus to get to places, but not really at too much of an expense of Ketu, okay? Because it's just such a small aspect. But had it been a strong Sun, meaning a strong aspect somehow, say it had been in Aries, exalted and aspecting it, then the person would have had lots of big decisions to make between developing their, hopes to get somewhere in life, which would have happened through relationships, 7th house, because the house of planets in is where it's going to manifest, or developing their own resources and path in life. And there would have been times in life where there would have been tough decisions. Because the Sun is so weak, those decisions haven't really happened. Because in the end, it's not a tough decision, it's easy. They're going to take the 1st, 2nd Ketu activated plan out. Okay, so Ketu is sitting pretty good still. Then it's influenced by the Moon, who rules the 10th sign from the Ascendant, which is therefore neutral. Not going to do anything. It's influenced by Mars, to just 2 points, inconsequential. And Mars, again, is neutral. It rules the 2nd and 7th house, so it's not going to have a big sway either way. Then it's influenced by Saturn, who happens to rule the 5th sign, the house of, the luck sign. So Saturn's going to be a Shubha, a temp Shubha, and is going to open up Ketu to more things. So this shows, and Saturn is in a great friend sign, it's in great dignity. So it's really going to help this Ketu. So it shows the person will have the perseverance and detachment, know when to let things go, that does allow Ketu to flourish more in developing this first and second house. So this is a wonderful Ketu that's very open, and it has the power of Saturn and Venus. Now the moon is in an enemy sign, so he's not in great dignity, so he's not going to be able to do much to help Ketu give any skills, unfortunately, okay? But still, it's a great Ketu because there's nothing bad on it. So this person's really had an easy, Venetian, harmonious, sweet time making a success in life. They've had to be a little patient at times. Saturn gives that quality of patience. But because they haven't felt a need to rush anywhere, they've just naturally ascended in their place in life and in their wealth. Okay? So you see, this person's Ketu is great all around. Okay? Let's see Rahu, though. Rahu now gets aspected by the Sun to 41 points. Okay? And that's a big dose to it, especially because the Sun is really strong. It's in its own sign in Leo. So that does show trying to get somewhere, trying to improve the level of survival of where they're at in life, 11th sign, is going to detract from Rahu developing relationships and developing their, increase in other people's resources, which is 8th house and bonding. Okay? So the Sun will detract from the time that they're willing to sacrifice in relationships. The Sun's in its own sign, so it's in good dignity, so it gives them the solar qualities that can help Rahu develop a good relationship, which are basically steadfastness and consistency and monogamity, which is a quality of the Sun. But the Sun's really not going to focus those qualities too much on Rahu. They've got it, but they're not going to really emphasize that onto Rahu, which means onto relationships and developing other people's resources, which is the 8th house. So the Sun will take away some time from that. Then, where is Rahu? Okay. Then the Moon, as we've talked about, is a neutral. Mars is the Lord, and it's really strong. So Mars will help Rahu become more open to things. It's a really strong aspect. Unfortunately, Mars is so close to the Sun, he's just 5 degrees away, that he's terribly combust. So hardly any of his rays can really help Rahu out. So it's not as good as it looks. A planet that's combust is just going to have so much less room to improve anything. Okay? But it still helps a little bit. Okay, Mercury is aspecting nicely, 47 points. Mercury is a good house lord, rules the 9th house. Mercury is in exaltation. So this means communication, friendship, mutual interest. All those things influencing Rahu can help being open-minded, trying the different possibilities, all qualities of Mercury, will all help this person very much develop the Rahu in the 7th house, the path of relationships, and Rahu conjunct the 8th cusp, the path of bonding to others and developing other people's resources, okay, and learning how to be resourceful together and developing trust. So that's a very good quality, okay, that's helping a lot. And really, it's helping, where's Rahu again? Okay, 47 points is helping more than the Sun is hurting. And it's exalted, so it's stronger. So Mercury's helping that Rahu a lot. Okay? Jupiter is aspecting to 47 points. Jupiter is the ruler of the 3rd sign from the ascendant and the 6th sign from the ascendant. So Jupiter has to do with what this person really wants to do, and also the needs they have to, fight for their survival, their 6th sign from the ascendant. And that's going to very much detract from Rahu's thing. Okay? So this Jupiter will make Rahu's life a little more difficult. Now, it does give him more wisdom and knowledge to deal with Rahu's affairs in the 7th and 8th Bhava, relationships and developing their resources with others. But they won't really, they have the wisdom, but it'll still keep them from focusing that much on relationships. So we see this person has so much of an easier time, developing themselves than relationships. Nothing gets in the way of their self-development and developing their own resources, but we see how Jupiter and the Sun do get in the way of developing their resources with others and developing a real working relationship. Even though Jupiter and the Sun both give them skills for that, these other planets will simply take away the time that they'll focus in that area. Venus is influencing the 55 points and Saturn the 35 points. Venus is the first lord. Saturn rules the 5th sign from the ascendant. They're both in decent dignity, and they're going to help Rahu. Okay? They're going to help Rahu. Venus through diplomacy, caring, developing win-win situations, which is the nature of Venus, and Saturn through perseverance. Okay? But we see Rahu's not perfect, right? His lord is combust. His lord's combust, and he has the strong influence of Jupiter, the 3rd and 6th lord, and the Sun, the 11th lord. All three difficult lords are influencing Rahu pretty strongly. Okay? Remember what I said about the beginning of Rahu period. Always watch Rahu. There's a tendency for Rahu to destroy the house it's in Rahu, unless it's pretty much perfect. If it has some problems, there's a good chance it's going to get destroyed. Rahu's lord's totally combust. We've got a strong 11th lord, a relatively strong 3rd and 6th lord, both influencing Rahu. So actually this person in Rahu period separated and divorced from their marriage. It ruined their relationship. And the old books will say if Rahu's in the 7th, it'll kill your spouse. So effectively it can, in most cases, will end your relationship in Rahu, unless Rahu's looking really, really nice. In this case, Rahu had enough problems to it that the relationship came to an end, unfortunately. Okay? And this Rahu's a little more severe, actually, because Rahu's not only triggering the 7th, but also the 8th Bhava cusp. So that the 8th Bhava cusp, in a woman's chart especially, and this is a woman's chart, especially has to do with the length of married life. So afflictions to the 8th house in a woman's chart can cause marriage to end prematurely. So Rahu's there. It's not a terrible Rahu, but it's not good. And like I said, Rahu just loves to destroy the Bhava cusp it's joined in the beginning of its period, unless that Rahu's pretty much perfect. And unfortunately, this Rahu's not totally perfect. Okay? All right, there's one example for you. Okay, now we've got a person who Rahu's in the 2nd house with Jupiter and Ketu's in the 8th. Let's look at Ketu first. And again, we've seen how this person's Ketu is not good and Rahu is just real mediocre. Ketu, let's start there. It's all alone. It's influenced by the Sun, the 11th Lord, the 30 points, and the Sun is in a friend sign, so it has some decent dignity. So the goal-centered nature, this person wanting to get somewhere in life, will detract from their desire to develop other people's resources and to bond to other people. So that would be an affliction. It's a woman's chart again, to the length of relationships that they're in through Ketu. Then it's influenced by the moon, which is indifferent. Then it's influenced by Mercury to 35 points. So that's helpful. Mercury is a benefic for this ascendant. It rules the 9th sign from the Lagna, so it'll open Ketu up to more possibilities. It's in good dignity and a great friend sign. So friendship, communication, using their skills and talents, trying the possible things, looking into the possibilities, all qualities of Mercury will help Ketu be more successful in their dealings with others. Then it's influenced by Jupiter to a whopping 55 points. And Jupiter is in a neutral dignity. But still, even in neutral, he will detract a little bit. Not much, luckily, though. So their own things they want to get done, they'll have a hard time sacrificing them for the sake of Ketu. Or for Rahu, for that matter, because Jupiter conjuncts Rahu. Okay? But it's in a neutral dignity, so it's not going to be serious. Venus is a benefic, but it's debilitated, so it won't be able to help. Saturn is helpful, helps to 25 points. And he's in its own sign. He rules the 5th, is why he becomes helpful. He's in his own sign. He gives perseverance. And he also gives, perseverance and patience and tolerance, the qualities of Saturn. Well, not exactly patience and perseverance more. Tolerance is a little different. Tolerance is ruled by the moon. And tolerance is how far you can get irritated before you feel bothered. And after you feel bothered or in pain, then Saturn comes in to persevere. But people with really good moon, they can just handle so many things before they start getting bothered. Okay? Anyway, so Saturn is helping Ketu as well. So Ketu himself is doing pretty good as far as his influences to them. He does have some stuff taken away by the Sun, but then he's helped by Mercury and Saturn. So he's pretty good. He's going to give some bad effects in Ketu Venus because his Lord is debilitated and combust. Okay. He'll give some trouble in Ketu Mars because Mars is sleeping. But as Ketu himself, he has the capacity to benefit from other people's resources more than he doesn't because of the help of Mercury and Saturn, both opening him up to possibilities and both giving him skills. Okay? So just Jupiter here is helping, is taken away from their focus on their life, but still helping them have resources and mutual needs met in with other people. Okay? So again, it's, they do rather develop the 8th house than to focus on doing what they want to do, which is Jupiter ruling the 3rd. Okay. Rahu. Rahu's in the 2nd house, all about developing their resources and resourcefulness. And 2nd house is not just getting the money, is not getting the money we need to pay our bills. It's about having the resources so that when the bills come, there's no problem to pay them. There's a difference there. The 6th house is about getting the money to pay the bills that we have. Oh, I got to pay this car payment. Where am I going to get the money? That's the 6th house. The 2nd house is collecting our money, saving money, developing our resources. So when we buy a car, we just go and buy it. You can see the difference? And then we own it. 6th house has to do with things that we don't really own. The car you don't own because you're paying lien on the car is a 6th house car. Okay? You don't own the car. You can't sell the car without permission of the bank, right? So 2nd house is about developing those resources. And of course, Jupiter, the 6th Lord, is there with Rahu. So that'll detract from their ability to develop their resources because instead they'll be chasing debts sometimes. And of course, Jupiter rules the 3rd house, which is their interest, which will take away a little bit. But again, not much. Jupiter's a neutral sign, so it's really, really minor in that. Other planets influencing Rahu are going to be so much more important. One is the Sun, so their desire to get somewhere will detract from them developing their resources and saving their money. Mars is the Lord of Rahu. Unfortunately, it's sleeping, so it can't open up Rahu to any more possibilities. Mercury is the good 9th Lord and the planet of skills that can help them develop their resources, but it's a tiny aspect of just 10 points. Venus at 37 points is debilitated, so it can't help, otherwise it would. So really, we've got the Sun hurting, Mercury helping. It's not a supported Rahu. Okay, it's not a helpful Rahu. It's not a Rahu that has an easy time developing their resources and resourcefulness. Unfortunately, okay. So in general, Rahu is going to make that area a struggle for them and not an area they want to engage in completely. This person would much rather be married to someone with money who take, and use other people's resources, than they would becoming wealthy themselves. So if you ask this person, would you rather marry someone wealthy or be wealthy yourself? They'd say, I'd rather just be married to someone who's wealthy. Okay? Because there's simply more focus on Ketu in the 8th than there is on Rahu in the 2nd. So this person has had trouble developing their resources. They've more been chasing debts and trying to, spend time and energy increasing their, getting a new degree or a new diploma or a new certificate, the Sun, which can help them, live on a higher level, on a better level. But still, even when they get to that higher level of income, their financial condition's the same. Okay, because they spend just as much, they don't manage their finances any better. You understand? So not a great Rahu based on this technique, but a decent Ketu. So Ketu gets a little bit of help, Rahu doesn't. So this lets us know in Rahu, this person had huge financial trouble. And you bet they did. Okay, Rahu was very, very, very difficult for them financially. It was a long time ago, many years ago, like over 20 years ago, I think. Like 35 years ago, but it was a trying time financially for them. It destroyed their resources because Rahu has enough bad stuff to it that in Rahu, he's going to definitely cause trouble. All right, let's look at this person's chart, who's so far had a pretty good Rahu and Moon. His Rahu and Ketu have been fantastic so far. But today we're going to see some of the issues that we didn't see before, and then you'll have a more well-rounded picture of this person's Rahu and Ketu. Starting with Ketu. It's with the Moon, who's exalted, but the 6th Lord, the Lord of material responsibility and fulfilling their debts and doing what one has to do to survive. It's taken away from Ketu's time in the 4th of being happy, being with family, and chilling. So this shows a person whose hard work ethic takes them away from times of finding happiness or working on inner happiness, which is 4th house. It just gives less opportunity. The Moon being exalted gives them that ability. It gives the capability to Ketu, but it takes away from the time spent on developing that. Okay? So this is a person who works hard to achieve in the world, to master the difficulties of the world, the 6th house, trying to earn money because that's how we can master the world. And I say money because it's in Taurus, which is all about developing wealth and resources. But it'll do so in a way that detracts from the time spent and just being happy. So easy for this person to work too much and feel good about working too much, even though they're not doing the simple things that can make them happy. So the Moon is detracting from developing the real happiness of Ketu. Then Mars is influencing, and Mars is a malefic too, because he rules the 3rd sign. So the things he wants to do, that he really wants to focus on and develop skills in and abilities, will detract from the happiness that Ketu wants to produce. Mercury is the 5th Lord. It's also the 8th, which is neutral, so is the 5th house Lord is going to determine what happens. Mercury is going to help, give him more skills, capacity for balancing and managing his life, which will help with his happiness. Jupiter is the 11th Lord, the Lord of trying to get somewhere in life. It's only influencing the 10 points, but it's there and it's in good dignity. So again, there's an emphasis on getting somewhere in life and detracting, not paying as much attention to worrying about being happy. Luckily, we have a nice Venus, a very nice Venus, as 9th Lord and Lord devotion and love, and 9th Lord being philosophy, helping them find happiness. So really nice save from Venus. And then Saturn, the Lagna Lord, is aspecting as well. So that means they'll be personally involved in developing their happiness. So Ketu is not perfect anymore like it was. We see a lot of hard work and effort put into mastering the troubles and the hardships in life and getting somewhere in life that will take away from Ketu giving full happiness. They just won't spend as much time worrying about being happy. they'll be hard and tough and do what they have to more, even though it makes them unhappy to have to do that thing. So sort of shows some of the strengths they have that pull them away from focusing solely on happiness. Okay? So when Ketu period comes, and they're in Ketu period, and Ketu just wants absolutes wherever he is. He's all about absolute. So Ketu wants absolute happiness in the 4th house. He's not going to have it because Jupiter is going to be worried about getting somewhere in life. Mars is going to worry about doing things it wants to do. And the Moon is going to worry about mastering all the physical troubles in life. And that'll detract from the absolute happiness that Ketu would otherwise give. Okay? Or could otherwise give. Now, how's Rahu? Rahu's with the Sun, which is, going to be indifferent, ruling an angle. By Mars, very strong aspect to Mars. Mars, fortunately, is the Lord of the 10th, the Lord of Rahu, and so it's going to put a lot of emphasis into cultivating Rahu's capacity for power and position, which it wants to develop in the 10th house. Okay, it'll put a lot of focus on there. Then Jupiter is aspecting the 50 points. That will show them wanting to get somewhere at the expense of their esteem even. And 11th house is where we want to get with their income and stuff. The 10th house is just about doing the best possible actions we can do. Just being the best we can, shining, doing the best job possible. That's what the 10th house is all about. And through that, we naturally get a material reward. But the 11th house is about really wanting to get somewhere. And you can, if you knew this person, you could see how this person's strong Jupiter influence over to this Rahu makes them so focused sometimes on where they want to get that they don't do their best to do their best job. They don't do their best to shine because they're more focused on how they can get more money out of the job than just doing the best job possible. Okay? Then the last, Venus is influencing the 5 points, very negligible, but a little bit of diplomacy and openness to helping Rahu succeed. Saturn's aspecting the 39 points, so perseverance, hard-working qualities to help them succeed. But it's Jupiter that gets in the way. And for this person, Jupiter is the main culprit, really. That this person at times wants to get somewhere more than they care about the work they want to do, but still they do care mostly for the work they want to do because it's all pretty strong. Oh, and of course we've neglected the Moon. The Moon is 54 points. It rules the 6th bhava. That's a strong influence, and that's again wanting to deal with finances, master financial difficulties at the expense of doing their best things. So we see the 6th and 11th lords influencing this Rahu in the 10th detracts from Rahu really trying to do the best possible work, which is what the 10th house is about, and being their most capable. Instead, there's more emphasis on what will give them a higher position or what will give them more ability to deal with the troubles in life. So they'd be more concerned about getting a degree so that they can get a higher income than doing a great job that earns them the higher income. So, and that's a very marked thing in this person's chart. In fact, this person was working for a company where everyone was getting paid the same much, and they weren't doing any better work than anywhere else, but they just went right up to the boss and demanded an income raise. They didn't even say, I'm working hard. They said, I need more money or else I'm not working here. And the boss doubled their income right there, kept paying everyone else low, and paid them more, just because the person was so insistent. You see that strong Moon in Jupiter of pushing themselves into a higher income bracket. So instead of just working hard and waiting for the boss to realize that they're really a good worker and voluntarily giving them a raise, that 11th Lord and 6th Lord wasn't concerned with how good they were doing. They were just concerned that they believed they wanted and believed they deserved more, so they just went and got it. Okay? All right. Okay, that's the pretty interesting example there. So we saw some weaknesses in Ketu and Rahu in that chart now, which weren't there before. Okay, now we have another person we've talked about with Ketu conjunct Mars. Now Mars, unfortunately, is sleeping, so he can't really help Ketu too much. He's in a neutral sign, but he can't help Ketu, which is unfortunate because Mars is a good house lord, right? He rules the 5th sign. He's the great planet for Cancer Ascendant that can really open them up to a lot of possibilities. But no, that's not going to happen to Ketu. Aspect-wise, the Sun aspects, but the Sun is the 2nd lord, which is indifferent. The Moon, the Lagna lord, aspects to 12 points. It's a teensy bit to help Ketu be open to some more possibilities and give a little receptivity to Ketu. Mercury, his lord aspects, but is sleeping, so he can't help. Jupiter, the 9th lord, the other benefic, helps, but he's sleeping, so can't help. Venus is exalted. Venus is the 11th lord. Strong desire to get somewhere in life in this person's chart. See how the 11th lord is the strongest planet? And that's very true about this person. Very desires to get to a higher level of living and to get somewhere in life. And that Venus is going to detract away from Ketu succeeding and getting away from the troubles of life, completing things, resolving things, resting and recuperating, those types of things. Saturn is 19 points and is very strong. Luckily, it's a weak aspect because for Cancer Ascendant, Saturn's evil. So here we have a Ketu who's only got evil influences to it. You know, as far as planets are concerned, only the bad house lords, not giving Ketu any opportunities to really flourish. Okay? You know, so Ketu in the 12th is all about liberation and getting away from the troubles in life. Can't happen because there's too much of a desire to get somewhere in life, Venus aspecting it, and too much of a desire to have their needs fulfilled in relationships, Saturn for Cancer. And that detracts from that Ketu desire. And so this is a person who really tries to emphasize their spiritual life and wants to grow spiritually and is very philosophically minded, but who still always ends up getting into emotionally intense relationships that destroy all of her peace and detachment, and also who's so concerned about getting somewhere and looking good, this Venus aspecting, that just doesn't give them the time to really cultivate this Ketu liberating, desiring planet. When it comes down to it, there's too much of a desire to be in a relationship that fulfills their needs, and there's too much of a desire to get somewhere in life. So Ketu doesn't do very good, and we've already seen how Ketu doesn't do good in this chart all around. It's troubled. Rahu, how's Rahu? Influenced by Sun as 2nd lord indifferent, by Mars, sleeping, not going to help, by Mercury, sleeping, so he's not going to hurt at least, by Jupiter, his lord, but his lord is sleeping, so he can't really help, and by Venus, who's exalted. So here we are again. Venus is getting in the way. So you see in this person's chart, the desire to get somewhere, 11th house, is ruining their capacity to really be open to tackling those nodes in an intelligent way. They just aren't open to it. Those nodes are completely blocked. So the person hasn't really made any progress. Their life has always been a struggle, 6th house, a mess of debt and financial chaos, and the desire to always escape trouble, but never being able to, and always just suffering stress. Okay? So very troubled Ketu and Rahu in this chart, and this person has had no happiness in life. You know, if Rahu and Ketu suck, you know, you just don't have a lot of happiness in life because we're just on that path too much of the time. Okay, here's a person who so far has had a pretty good Ketu and Rahu. Let's continue looking. Ketu's in the 10th sign, but conjunct the 11th cusp. So it's about achieving and getting somewhere in life. That's its goal. And it is influenced by the Sun, a neutral planet, rules the 12th, by the Moon, the 11th lord, therefore an evil planet. So the Moon will detract from Ketu's capacity to get somewhere. Okay, but let's see what else is there. which that simply means they'll be receptive to other things, and as a result, not focus on Ketu. So they'll easily get pulled away by other things they're attracted to, and therefore not develop Ketu, the 11th house, increasing their income, increasing their level of existence in the world, which is what the 11th bhav is about. Mars is aspecting the 56 points. He's in a friend sign, so he can give a pretty good whapping. And Mars is an evil planet, rules the third house, the third sign. So Mars is going to show the other things that they want to do that reduce the focus on developing their income, and so their 11th house matters, or achieving in their hopes and goals. Jupiter influences, he's indifferent. Venus influences strongly, and he's a Shubha for Virgo rising. He has 36 points of aspect. So Venus will give them some diplomacy, some good luck. 9th bhava, open them up to more possibilities that can boost their income and things like that. And then Saturn influences, he's the 5th house lord, 5th sign from the ascendant, which makes him a benefic. But then he also rules the 6th, which makes him a malefic. So for Virgo, Saturn's indifferent. He's not going to help either way. So really, there's the good Venus combating a strong moon and a strong Mars influence. So Ketu is not very open to its full development. Okay? So Ketu period himself is just going to be real mediocre. He's not really going to boost 11th house matters because he's just not open to the possibilities enough. Okay? So not a great Ketu in this chart. Now Ketu Mercury, because Mercury rules Ketu and Mercury we've seen is in a good Lajitadya Vashta, will give some success. But that's really it. Most of Ketu Dasha is going to be real mediocre. Just not good enough. Let's look at Rahu on the other hand. Rahu's conjunct its Lord. So Rahu's very, very open to becoming happy and having, developing 5th house things, finding happiness with children, happiness in one's creativities, and using their intelligence and wisdom. Then Jupiter is aspected by indifferent Sun, who rules the 12th, by the Moon just a little bit, and Mars a little bit. So the two evil house lords are barely aspecting him. Mercury aspects nicely to 47, and Venus to 20. So you see, Rahu has more of Mercury and Venus, the trine lords on it. Mercury rules the Lagna, Venus rules the 9th, then the 11th and 3rd lords, Moon and Mars. So this is and it has its own lord as well. So Rahu's very open to being, developing his intelligence, wisdom, and happiness, and being with his children. So it's no surprise that this person, when they had a child, was happy to spend more time with the child, even at the expense of their income. Okay? Which is what they did. So this is a nice Rahu, a person who's definitely moving with a lot of openness and success into 5th house matters, but who's not really going to have much luck with 11th house matters, 11th cusp matters. Okay? But honestly, if you're going to have a good Rahu or a good Ketu, if you have to have the choice, pick the good Rahu usually. Okay? Because a bad Rahu can just tear things up usually so much more severely. And finally, the person who was the frustrated or thwarted monastic who wasn't allowed to take a life of renunciation as they had hoped. Ketu, conjunct Mars. Mars rules the 1st and 6th for Scorpio, so it's good for a 1st lord but bad for 6th. So it really doesn't help or hinder. Doesn't make Ketu open or closed. The Sun is the ruler of the 10th, so he's indifferent. Mercury rules the 8th lord, the lord of, which is neutral, but also the 11th lord from the ascendant. So Mercury will detract from Ketu's success. It will show goals to get somewhere that will detract from Ketu's ability to let go and release and be at one and move towards liberation and total peace and freedom, which is what Ketu's goal in the 12th house is all about. Okay? So Mercury will take away from that. And how will it do that? Well, it's the 11th sign, but the 10th cusp is there, which shows there's a strong desire for power and affluence in this person, which will take away from Ketu's ability. So far we see nothing helping Ketu, just Mercury closing Ketu down to possibilities. Ketu is influenced by the moon, who's the ninth lord. So the moon is helping, but he's in a neutral sign, or sorry, an enemy sign. So he's really not able to help. Jupiter can help, but just to 1 point, real mediocre. And then Saturn is not helping because he rules the third and fourth signs. On account of ruling the third sign, he becomes a malefic planet and closes the possibilities down on Ketu. He's in a neutral sign, so he can't do that very much. But you see, there's really nothing to open up Ketu to the possibilities. The doors are all closed. And so, when it comes right down to it, Ketu does not get to really develop the 11th and 12th houses as by himself. He can give some decent results through some of his other planets, through Venus, for instance, and give short-term decent results. But throughout his dasha, in his own way, he's just not going to give a lot of growth in 11th and 12th house matters. So it's been a real frustrating Ketu for this person. See if Rahu's any better. Sun is influencing who's indifferent. The moon is helping to 22 points. Mars is indifferent. Mercury is hurting to 20 points. So we got Mercury hurting more because he's in stronger dignity than the moon is helping, because the moon's in an enemy sign, so he's not really able to help. And let's see, Mercury himself is in a great friend sign, so he can detract from Rahu. Jupiter, luckily, ruling the 5th house, is a real helpful planet and strongly aspecting Rahu, so really helping. But then Venus is indifferent, so we don't have to worry about Venus. But then Saturn's hurting to 40 points. So while we got a really good Jupiter, we do get some other troubled planets of Mercury and Saturn. Jupiter, luckily, is in better dignity, so he's going to help more than those two planets are going to hurt, because Saturn and Mercury together equal 60. And Jupiter onto Rahu is 59, so they're about the same strength of influence. But Jupiter, being in Mula Trikona, is awake, is going to help twice as much as Mercury or Moon are going to hurt. So it's a neutral Rahu. It's 50-50. So Rahu's path will be moderately open, but not really embracing developing the 5th and 6th houses. But better than Ketu. So this person is better off embracing the 5th and 6th houses, using their intelligence, 5th house, to master the world, 5th house, and living as creatively as they can while they fulfill their karmic responsibilities, which is 6th house in this world. And learning to do that on their own way, through their own path, which is Rahu and Aries. So they'll have a mediocre degree of success in that, and that's how their life is going to unfold. They just aren't going to have open doors at Ketu. Okay? Alright, so I hope these examples let you see how important it is to look at just how open a person's life path is to them really going towards Rahu or going towards Ketu. If those doors are closed because we're focused on other things, we're just not going to live in those areas of Rahu and Ketu and develop them a lot. Alright? So anyway, listen to this class a couple times. We covered a lot of new stuff. And as far as the house lords, those benefic and malefic house lords, we'll have more classes on those down the road. There's a lot of interesting uses of those. But looking at how much focus is put on Rahu or Ketu is one of the very important uses of that principle.